Drop the protein bar right now. Seriously, put down the diet soda. What if the exact foods you're buying specifically to optimize your health contain hidden ingredients that are literally working against your gut? Today, we're dismantling the health halos around 8 common foods, because the biochemical reality of what's inside them is way more surprising and honestly a bit more alarming than you might think.
And that's exactly the question we're answering in this explainer. We're doing a deep dive into the research highlighted by Dr. Saurabh Sethi. He's a highly respected gastroenterologist trained at both Harvard and Stanford. We are looking at 8 specific food categories he's flagged. Now, some of these are obvious offenders, but others, they are aggressively marketed as explicitly healthy. To figure out what's really going on, we have to bypass that marketing completely and strictly examine the biochemical reality.
Section 1. The health food illusion.
Look, we all know a neon blue fast food slushie is junk. No surprise there. But what about the foods engineered and packaged to look like they belong in a high-end supplement store? We demand to know what they actually do inside the body.
Exactly. But before we get into the specifics, we have to establish our absolute baseline rule for evaluating evidence today. Strong mechanistic findings do not automatically mean the same degree of effect occurs in every human. As we break down these ingredients, we are going to strictly separate established human population data from experimental or animal models. Lab science is fantastic for identifying potential mechanisms, but we can't just leap to saying an ingredient causes disease in all humans without the clinical data backing it up.
Section 2. Gut barrier disruptors.
All right, let's get into our first physiological grouping. We're looking at foods containing synthetic dyes, think red 40 and yellow 5, along with certain emulsifiers like polysorbate 80 and carboxymethylcellulose. These are in everything from snacks to baked goods, but I don't just want to hear that they're bad. I want the biochemical mechanism. How are they actually impacting the gut?
To understand that, you've got to look at the intestinal epithelial layer. This is a critical single-cell barrier lining your gut. It's basically your body's ultimate security checkpoint. It regulates what gets absorbed into the bloodstream and what stays out, which plays a massive role in immune signaling. Experimental research has investigated how synthetic dyes and emulsifiers interact directly with this critical mucosal barrier, potentially compromising its integrity.
So let's trace the steps of this experimental model. Step 1, you're exposed to these dyes or emulsifiers. Step 2 is where it gets interesting, altered microbiome and permeability. And step 3 leads straight to inflammatory signaling. The research here specifically calls out effects on serotonin-related pathways in the gut, which is massive for gut motility and mood, and points to inflammatory markers like IL-23. What does this actually mean for the beneficial organisms trying to survive in there?
Well, experimental research raises significant questions about how these compounds might change populations of crucial beneficial bacteria, specifically organisms like Akkermansia, which we know protects that mucus layer. There are also experimental links to increased intestinal permeability, what people often call leaky gut, and colitis-related inflammatory pathways. But, and this is a massive but, these are experimental findings. The mechanism of disrupting the intestinal epithelial layer is definitely concerning, but we have to interpret it carefully. These findings are not automatically proven widespread disease effects in humans.
Section 3. The fake health halos.
This is where we pivot to perhaps the most deceptive category of all, ultra-processed protein bars and diet drinks sweetened with things like sucralose or saccharin. We have to actively challenge the assumption that just because a label screams high protein or 0 calories, it automatically equals healthy. Let's break down the biological reality of those protein bars first. The marketing claim is super simple. High protein, good for muscle, must be good for you, right? But flip the package over. You're usually staring at an incredibly long list of additives, artificial sweeteners, synthetic fibers, and emulsifiers. For a lot of people, these ingredients cause severe digestive tolerance issues. We see significant osmotic gastrointestinal effects, meaning these highly processed compounds draw water directly into the gut, leading to bloating, cramping, and general discomfort. You absolutely cannot judge a protein bar just by the word protein. You have to evaluate the entire chemical matrix it's delivered in.
Then we have diet drinks. The research on sucralose and saccharin is fascinating because it's not just about bypassing calories. These sweeteners cause intense sweet taste receptor stimulation, but the real critical piece is what they do to microbiome diversity. Research is investigating how they might alter the gut microbiome and literally influence metabolic responses. And here's the kicker. The glycemic response and microbiome alterations are highly variable depending entirely on the individual person and their unique baseline gut health.
Section 4. Metabolic and sugar saboteurs.
This category includes sugary breakfast cereals and condiments packed with high fructose corn syrup, or HFCS. We're shifting focus a bit here to look at how these refined, hyper-palatable carbohydrates manipulate your blood glucose and directly impact liver function.
Okay, I demand the exact mechanism for how high fructose corn syrup actually damages us. Why is it different from other carbs? What exactly is hepatic lipogenesis?
It all comes down to how different sugars are metabolized. Fructose is primarily handled by the liver. When you consume excessive amounts of rapidly available carbohydrates, especially fructose, your liver triggers hepatic lipogenesis. This is the process where your liver literally converts that excess fructose directly into fat. And when we compare sugary cereals to an ideal carbohydrate, the difference is stark. Highly refined cereals deliver a massive hit of rapid carbohydrates with practically zero fiber. Contrast that with an ideal carbohydrate source, which is high in fiber, offering sustained blood glucose control and actual satiety. Sugary cereals spike your glucose and leave you starving an hour later.
So the cascade basically looks like this. Chronic high fructose intake from things like constant HFCS condiments leads directly to increased liver fat accumulation. Over time, this significantly elevates your risk of metabolic-associated steatotic liver disease, or MSLD. It's a progressive metabolic dysfunction.
Exactly. But I have to carefully caveat this because context matters immensely. A single squirt of ketchup is not going to instantly give you MISLD. The real danger of high fructose corn syrup and added sugars is driven by chronic intake within an overall calorie-dense diet. It's your aggregate dietary pattern that dictates metabolic health, not just one isolated meal.
Section 5. Vascular and cellular threats. For this final pairing, we're looking at high-sodium canned soups and processed meats like hot dogs and deli cuts. We're moving the lens away from the gut microbiome for a second and looking at systemic cardiovascular and cellular impacts. Take canned soups. The issue usually isn't the soup itself. The veggies and broth are fine. It's the massive, hidden sodium load. Excess sodium intake drives up blood pressure, but fundamentally, it causes endothelial stress. This is tension and dysfunction applied directly to the inner lining of your blood vessels. High sodium exposure essentially forces your vascular system to work under sustained distress.
And then we get to hot dogs and processed meats. This is where the data gets incredibly heavy. It really does, because this isn't just experimental animal data anymore, this is population-level evidence. The International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is part of the WHO, officially classifies processed meat as a Group 1 carcinogen. This is largely due to the presence of N-nitroso compounds, which are formed during the processing and curing of these meats. The evidence shows a strong link between this consumption and colorectal cancer.
But let's expertly deconstruct this hazard classification so we don't cause a panic. A Group 1 classification describes the strength of the evidence that something can cause cancer. It does not describe the size of the absolute risk from a single serving. It means they are very confident a link exists, but dose and frequency are everything. Having one hot dog at a summer barbecue does not inevitably cause colorectal cancer.
Section 6. The evidence-based takeaway.
The goal of this explainer wasn't to just deconstruct and terrify you about what's sitting in your pantry. It's about empowering you with practical, evidence-based consumer habits. So let's summarize the frameworks. First, you have to look past marketing buzzwords like protein or zero calorie. Second, always separate experimental animal findings, like the synthetic dye and emulsifier data, from established human data, like the processed meat findings. And third, biological outcomes are dictated by chronic frequency. Pay close attention to the foods you eat repeatedly every single day, not just the occasional treat.
The final authoritative call to action for everyone watching this explainer is simple. Read the label. Question the claim. Follow the evidence. Stop accepting marketing halos at face value and start demanding biochemical truth from the products you put into your body.
So, we have a challenge for you. Go check your kitchen right now. Which of these 8 items, the diet snacks, the high-sodium soups, the ultra-processed protein bars, sugary cereals, diet drinks, processed meats, HFCS condiments, or emulsifier-heavy baked goods are actually sitting in your pantry? Drop your findings in the comments below. Let's start a conversation. And what do you think is the biggest health halo scam on grocery store shelves today? We'd love